This episode of Distraction is sponsored by Omega Bright CBD, formulated by Omega Bright Wellness, creators of the #1 omega-3 supplements for the past 20 years. Omega Bright CBD, safe, third-party tested, and it works. Shop online at omegabrightwellness.com. And by Landmark College, offering comprehensive support for students with ADHD and other learning differences. Learn more at lcdistraction.org. Landmark College, the college of choice for students who learn differently.
Even though the person with ADHD, their intention may not be to ignore, to not pay attention, to forget, they have to understand that behavior still has an impact on their partner.
Right. Hello, this is Dr. Ned Hallowell, and welcome to the opening episode of Distraction. Fittingly enough, the first episode in August of 2019 is graced by my lovely and wonderful wife, Sue. Always the favorite guest. I don't think I need to introduce her, but for those of you who have not heard her before, Sue and I have been married for 31 years. I would say wonderful years, but she doesn't like me to say that because she doesn't like me to brag. She would prefer I say 31 strenuous, difficult, horrible years. But anyway, we've been married for 31 years, and that's a fact. And we have 3 wonderful children, now aged 30, 27, and 24, Lucy, Jack, and Tucker. Sue is an incredible therapist, a social worker, the best therapist I know. And she also runs our office in New York City and runs our lives. She's an amazing woman, the kindest person I've ever met. And truly the cornerstone of our lives. And we're grateful to her every single day. I really love having her on the podcast, and her specialty, naturally enough, is working with couples where one or both members have the wonderfully interesting condition, so misleadingly called ADHD, which I'm renaming, John Rady and I are renaming in our next book, VAST, Variable Attention Stimulus Trait. So without further ado, let me introduce Sue. Look how I made that little rhyme. Adieu, Sue.
Adieu, Sue. That's my Ned.
Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, sweetie.
So we can talk about so many different things. I said I was going to ask you, what are the elements that you think predict a marriage that will go well versus a marriage that won't go well, particularly when one member of the couple has this thing that I now call VAST, but most people call ADHD.
Well, I can certainly tell you what predicts in couples therapy what's going to make things go best. Mm-hmm. It's whether both people are really willing to look at themselves and what they bring to the relationship, the challenges they bring to the relationship. I always like to say that whoever comes in my door, actually whether they have ADHD or not, but every couple that graces my door, whether they will cop to it or not, their primary thing that they think needs to happen is their partner needs to be fixed. That if only my partner wasn't the way they are, if only my partner did this better, then the relationship would be better. And that is just not true. And
you're still trying to fix me.
I'm not trying to fix you.
Yes, you are.
I'm trying to understand you as you're trying to understand me. And I know that I bring a lot to the table. I mean, that's why I tell this story over and over about the kitchen counter, because we talk about the kitchen counter and what a mess it was for years. I don't know if everybody knows, but not only do I have a husband with ADHD, I have 3 children with ADHD. Mm-hmm. And in our kitchen, we have a counter that is constantly covered with everything.
In fact, we're doing this interview right next to that kitchen counter,
which is covered with things. And I used to get so mad about this. I used to say, how can you guys be so inconsiderate? You don't care. It's not so hard
Selfish.
to put things over there. I would get so angry about it. But one of the things that I've really learned to do for myself, as well as encourage other people, is I began to think, why does this bother me so much? Why does this make me so angry? I began to think it's almost like it's imperative that the counter be clean, that is a moral issue, that is the way a counter is supposed to be. But when I really stopped to think about it, what I understood about myself is I spend a lot of time in the kitchen. And when the counter is covered, it makes me feel chaotic. You know, I'm someone who likes things structured and likes space more organized. And when that counter, it has a lot on it, I end up feeling chaotic. Now, that's my problem. It's really not everybody else's problem. And once I was able to be aware of that, then I was able to develop strategies. So we developed this plan where every day I straighten out the counter, and then after 2 days, I've let everybody know anything of theirs will be removed from the counter. I don't do it with anger anymore. I don't yell at people. I don't get upset with people. You guys don't like it when I move things, but you've been given lots of notice. But what I've been able to do is look at myself and not just blame you or the family for doing something. And I figured out where the issue is. People in a couple begin to think that there are defined ways that the world should be. And we have to understand not just about our partner and why they do things the way they do them, but we also have to understand why we want things the way that we do them. And couples, when each individual is really able to look at themselves as well and stop just wanting to fix their partner, that's when a couple can really make progress.
And how, when you do your couples therapy, how do you help them do that? That's our dog barking in the background, by the way. Our dog is Max.
You know, the first thing I really have to do is develop a relationship with both people, because no one wants to hear that they're the locus of the issue. And it often takes a lot of work. Learn how to ask questions and be curious about both themselves and curious about the other person rather than make assumptions. You know, one of the things that I try to work with people first to try to understand is we all are smart enough to know that we all view things from our own lens. But it's really funny, in those that are close to us, even though we know that the other person has a different way of thinking, feeling, processing the world, we make the assumption that they're doing it in the same way that we are. And so we determine their intentions, we determine everything based on how we see the world. So early on, I try to begin to help each person separate that out a little bit, so that they can begin to question and have some curiosity that maybe the other person's reasons or ways of doing things isn't what they assume it is. Once you're able to do that, then you're able to begin to think about it differently. I talk a lot about intention and impact with people. You know, one of the mistakes I made when I first started doing this work is everybody was talking about how the person with ADHD, how their brain is different. And how their intentions were not, it's not their intention to forget things all the time. It's not their intention to not pay attention. Right? But that would get you a little ways, but then I found the couples therapy still falling apart, the person without ADHD continuing to be angry, and then it went more into the, oh, that's just an excuse. What I found out that I had to pay more attention to was impact. That even though the person with ADHD, their intention may not be to ignore, to not pay attention, to forget, they have to understand that behavior still has an impact on their partner. right? And so when you're able to begin to make sure that both people are being heard, then they're able to begin to take more responsibility for themselves.
So let's say the ADD guy says, I didn't mean to forget your birthday. My intention was to remember your birthday. I just forgot your birthday.
Right.
So
right.
Then you say...
And
what?
then I say, so it was your intention, but how do you imagine that makes her feel?
Mm-hmm.
And are you able to open up yourself a little bit to imagine and to listen to how that makes her feel? And I say, that's really going to be hard for you because people with ADHD, they often have so much shame,
right,
and so many years of being told that they do things wrong. Right. And so I say that to them. And I say, so that makes it really hard for you to hear the impact on her because you feel so bad. There's part of you deep down that feels so bad about what you're doing.
So what does he do with that? He feels bad and ashamed. So he says...
So, I think shame is the greatest disability there is, honestly. I know you talk about fear, but I honestly think that shame is. And I think that what shame and its counterpart, externalization, and for those of you who don't know, shame is when you take whatever is happening and you internalize it and blame yourself.
So
and
you feel bad that
you feel bad about yourself.
You feel, well, let's be concrete. You feel bad that you forgot the birthday.
Well, you feel like you're just not a good person, or you're never good enough, or you never do something.
You say, I'm just a bad person who forgets birthdays.
Exactly. No. Or you externalize because you can't tolerate that feeling of feeling bad and feeling shame.
You're just a bad person who always blames me for
or I wouldn't have forgotten your birthday, but you're
so mean to me.
You're so mean to me, I forgot it, or I forgot it because of blah 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 blah, something outside of yourself, right? What both of those are really ways to keep the feelings away. Even though you're feeling...
How is shame a way of keeping the feelings away?
Because it's, rather than taking responsibility for just the fact that you're someone who is forgetful, right? One of the symptoms of your ADD may be that you become very distracted with a lot of different things, and you forget things. That, in and of itself, is not... If you can separate out the shame from it, if you can see it as a symptom, if you can see it as just something about how you are in terms of behaviors, as opposed to part of who you are, it becomes easier to not let it be such a big deal. Mm-hmm. And it makes it so that you don't have to feel bad about yourself. And when you don't feel bad about yourself, then you can develop strategies to help yourself.
I've been taking a new supplement called Omega Bright CBD. As I've mentioned before, Omega Bright CBD was created by my good friend, Dr. Carol Locke, graduate of Harvard Medical School, and her company, Omega Bright Wellness. They've been making the #1 omega-3 supplements for the past 20 years. Well, Carol and her team decided to break new ground, having set the standard for purity, safety, and efficacy in the world of omega-3s, and they've brought that same commitment to excellence to their new CBD supplement. I take it myself. It helps me with my reactivity, my impatience. It kind of just puts a smoother edge. In no way is it a buzz or a high, anything like that. It's way more subtle. But it's a very noticeable, subtle effect, and one that I've come to really appreciate as I take it every day. So, all right, get Omega Bright CBD online at omegabrightwellness.com. And now Distraction listeners can save 20% on their first order by using the promo code PODCAST2020. That's PODCAST2020. Go to omegabrightwellness.com and order Omega Bright CBD. You'll be glad you did, just as I am. Now, how does the other person, the person whose birthday was forgotten, how does she deal with that?
Well, I can tell you, there's a true two-pronged approach for them too, right? Mm-hmm. First of all, if someone really feels like their partner understands the impact, really takes responsibility for how it makes them feel. You see, when somebody says, I'm just a bad person, that's really about them. It takes the focus away from the person whose birthday was forgotten, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Which is the feeling that people often have. Mm-hmm. If someone can really say, look, you're right, I really have trouble, I get distracted and I forget things. And I really understand that hurt your feelings and made you feel unloved, and I am really sorry about that. If someone hears that, they still may not like it, but at least they feel connected. At least they feel loved. And that's a really different experience. And that's what a lot of these couples can never get to. Now, of course, the person with ADHD, they also really have to buy in and understand that. So if they forgot somebody's birthday because they're not distracted, or if they didn't pay attention, that would mean probably something more dynamic, or would mean that they were angry, or it would mean that they don't care, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. So they have to be willing to understand that there is a different lens. And they really have to buy into the fact that, you know, their partner with ADHD really does get distracted. And when they forget something, it doesn't have the same meaning mm-hmm. for them. Mm-hmm. So they have to really be able to buy into the idea of intent mm-hmm. and see that it really is a different thing, mm-hmm. which they are more likely to be able to do if the person with ADHD really feels the impact. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Oh,
yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. And then there's the old problem where the spouse doesn't want to have ADD be used as an excuse.
Right.
And, you know, I always say to people, no, it's not an excuse, but it is an explanation.
But where it becomes an excuse, where that comes from, is exactly what I'm talking about. When people go to externalization or shame rather than taking responsibility.
Right. But it's an explanation to help you take responsibility more effectively.
That's exactly
not
right.
An excuse to get out of taking responsibility.
That's right. But you know what's amazing to me is even people who proudly wear the banner of ADHD sometimes, you know, I have ADHD and I'm proud of it, or I'm not, they still fight the symptoms that make up the ADHD. And that's where the problem comes.
How do they fight them?
So they may say, I have ADHD, mm-hmm. but say there's someone who's always late. Because that's an easy, they won't really take responsibility that they really have trouble being on time. Mm-hmm. You know, they make it about, I just can't help that, or I'm a bad person because of that, or if you love me, you just accept me, mm-hmm. you know, instead of just really understanding, yes, timeliness, you know, because of the way that I think in the world, being on time is hard for me. And if you can really see that as a problem that you want to solve, then you can develop strategies mm-hmm. that aren't going to work all the time, but you can certainly do better. But people with ADHD, they'll often say, I don't want to get help with that, or I don't really need to put strategies in place. I'm just going to be better next time. Mm-hmm. I'm just not going to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. Or they get mad at the other person for getting upset with them. Mm-hmm. And so even though they say they have ADHD, they don't want to accept that they really have trouble with time management, or they don't really want to accept that they have trouble with different things.
But on the other hand, you know, just to take the other point of view, I don't think someone should spend a lifetime trying to get good at what they're bad at. You know, at some point you want to say, look, I'm just not going to get better at this. Now, and so I probably always will be late. And you know, you don't offer that as an excuse. You offer it as a part of who I am. In my own personal case, as you know, I don't remember names. I just simply can't remember names. And I no longer feel ashamed or guilty about that. It's just a fact of who I am. And if someone doesn't like that about me, that's their problem. It's just I no longer think that's a failing on my part, because it's a quirk of my brain. It's like the fact that I'm also left-handed. It doesn't hurt anybody, and if someone does take offense at that, that's their problem. I'm fully ready to explain to them, I have this neurological problem. My brain doesn't remember names. So, and unless I walked around with a notebook, writing down, okay, you're going to describe the person, took a picture of them, it would be ridiculous, the lengths that I'd have to go to. And for some people, the lengths they have to go to be on time would be equally ridiculous.
So one of the things that I really do work with people is realistic expectations of what is possible to change and what isn't possible to change, right? One of the famous ones I use for people is you would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, about how many people come in, and one of the major issues is whether people close the cabinet doors.
Oh, yes.
Or whether they turn off the lights before they go to bed.
I wrote my satirical piece in Super Parenting for ADD, where the guy says, when I take something out of the cabinet and I don't even notice if it's open or not.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And that's the kind of thing that I absolutely agree with you, that there are not really strategies one can put into place.
Right.
I don't buy so much the timeliness issue so much. I do agree that you will never be perfect at it, right? And I really work with people around, again, what are realistic expectations. But I do think that there are strategies that you can put into place that can help you with that. You just have to understand what it is that gets in your way and be willing to do that.
Once you've put all the strategies into place,
then you've done the best you can do.
Like I've done all I can do about names. Well, not all I could do, like I said, but I'm not going to go to the length of writing notebooks and putting posters up and hiring an assistant to follow me around saying this one is. I suppose if I were a politician, maybe I'd have to do that. But since I'm not, I'll just live with the people wondering why I can't remember their name.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you don't want to blow off being late, because it can cost you your job and it can cost you,
lots of things. It's really important. Right. And I do try to make the differentiation, but yes, they're never going to be perfect on it. But I do think that is the kind of thing that, there are more practical things that you can put into place rather than your brain just escaping you. Right. And so I really try to work with people around what is realistic and what isn't realistic and what needs to be done. And sometimes I try to get people to, think out of the box. Like, this isn't about timeliness, but I worked with a family, and I think a couple of the kids had ADHD too, and mornings were just very disorganized. And even if Dad, it would take him a while once he took his medication, and it would just be a mess. And the family was just very distressed about this. What we ended up deciding was he would either have to stay in bed until everybody left or get up before everybody got up.
And that's a good example of thinking outside the box. Well, talking about escaping us, the time has escaped us. As always, when we have you on, the time just disappears. Would you come back again soon?
I surely would.
We really should have you on more often. It's wonderful. I know our listeners love it as much as I do. We just begin talking and we just keep talking, which is not surprising.
After 31 years.
31 miserable years. Correct? Is that what you want me to say? 31 impossibly difficult years full of Sturm und Drang, right?
That's not what I mean. You know that what I hate is when experts, quote unquote, make it sound like they have all the answers. Well, and that is something I can't stand.
We certainly do not have all the answers. So this is Dr. Ned Hallowell, who does not have all the answers.
And his wife, Sue.
Who does not have all the answers. Thanking you for joining us on this first episode of Distraction. Please come back and join us again. We look forward to building this community as this year develops. Thank you so much. This is Dr. Ned Hallowell. Until next time for Distraction. The episode of Distraction you just heard was sponsored by Omega Bright CBD, formulated by Omega Bright Wellness, creators of the #1 omega-3 supplements for the past 20 years. Omega Bright CBD, safe, third-party tested, and it works. Shop online at omegabrightwellness.com.